The situation in Sudan is worsening, with the UN describing it as one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes of the 21st century. More than 150,000 people have been killed as paramilitary group the Rapid Support Forces battles government forces. Both sides have been accused of atrocities, while the RSF is accused of genocide, and 14 million people have been displaced. It's true that the crisis isn't being given enough attention. It's also true that the foreign states who are fueling the fighting with money and arms, the United Arab Emirates in particular, are lucrative UK allies. So who might be in a position to put pressure on them to stop? Who, I wonder? Who, you ask? Take a look.
I think we need the same international energy coming together around Sudan as we've seen come together around Gaza to get a ceasefire there. We have to get a ceasefire in Sudan urgently, given the mass atrocities, and shine that spotlight. And I'm continuing to speak to the Quad countries, that's the UAE, that's also Egypt, that's also Saudi and the US, about keeping that urgent pressure on to get the ceasefire in place. And I have deliberately made the issues around Sudan one of the top priorities here in the Foreign Office, because this is the worst humanitarian crisis of the 21st century. So we need that whole spectrum of pressure on other countries that have the ability to influence what is happening in Sudan, also on issues around the weapons, the external support, and also this urgent humanitarian aid. We have to shine this spotlight and not look away.
Not going to mention them though, are you? Very interesting, the coded language. The countries who are responsible, who are engaging in. Which country is that? Which country is that, Yvette? Do you want to name them? Might that hurt some potential trade deal with Chris Bryant off in Dubai, trying to do some trade deal? Very interesting as well, if I have to say. We need the attention that Gaza had. And she's not wrong to say that it deserves similar attention to Gaza, given the scale of the humanitarian crisis and what looks to me like a genocide being committed against Sudanese people by the RSF. But you can't be Yvette Cooper. You cannot be a member of the Labour government and talk about like the scale at which that there needs to be international attention on Sudan is similar to Gaza. I mean, like, well, you were part of the axis that was defending Israel during its genocide in Gaza. Your government increased arms sales to Israel more than it had been previously, despite the kind of virtue signal of the very small number of arms licenses that were rescinded. You had people going on trips to Israel to meet with Gideon Sa'ar. You were out there having a meeting with Gideon Sa'ar about Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, while you should have been criticising the fact that they were committing genocide. So to try and say that, there needs to be international attention to Sudan because it's a terrible situation similar to what Gaza is, I'm like, well, maybe you should look inward first, right? At the relationships that you have, first of all, with Israel, and of course, the United Arab Emirates. But again, you can't even call out Israel, but you'll pretend, or you'll kind of gesture a calling out the UAE with regards to what's happening in Sudan. Dahlia, she's really talking out of both sides of her mouth there, isn't she?
I mean, it's obscene. And I'm seeing this increasing tendency from people who are essentially apologists for the Israeli genocide of Palestinian people, who are trying to delegitimize the steep and righteous opposition, popular opposition to Zionism and solidarity with the Palestinians. These apologists for Israel use Sudan as a kind of rhetorical device, as a kind of whataboutism. And none of this is out of genuine investment in the righteous cause of Sudan, but rather to try and deflect criticism of their own role, including our own government's role in the genocide of Palestinians. And it is absolutely foul. It is disgusting. It is disgusting to reduce the horror of the genocide against the Sudanese, to reduce that to a rhetorical battering ram. It's a disgusting trivialization of Sudanese life. And look, it is undeniable that Sudan has not gained the international popular attention that Palestine has had. And within anti-colonial movements, who, by the way, unlike Yvette Cooper, have the moral and political authority to interrogate this unevenness in attention, there have been important discussions and mobilizations and thinking about why this unevenness and attention has happened. And, I have my own theories as to why this might be. I think it's primarily because, especially in the West, we've lost a tradition of international solidarity where we treat these struggles as being zero sum, as being separate, and as somewhat kind of competing for attention. This idea that if you give one struggle airtime, you're taking airtime away from another struggle. I don't think that that's true. In fact, what is happening in Sudan and what is happening in Palestine are not the same, but they are deeply interconnected. And one of the ways in which they are interconnected is in the role that Britain is playing in it, the meaningful role that Britain is playing in it. Much like in Palestine, Britain is historically and contemporarily complicit in the current atrocities we are seeing. Firstly, in the historic divide and rule that was part of the British Empire that laid the groundwork for conflict and genocide and instability that we see in Sudan and across the formerly colonized world, but also more urgently in the complicity of our military industry, something that is part of Yvette Cooper's jurisdiction as Home Secretary. So we have, much like Britain is sending F-35 components to Israel to be used against the Palestinians, we are also seeing that we are continuing to sell arms to the UAE, which, according to the UN, have been found to end up in the arms of the RSF, who are committing a genocide against the Sudanese. And so in both contexts, it's that primacy of the military-industrial complex above all else. It's the devaluing of life, particularly of the lives of people in the global south. And it's our broken imperialistic geopolitical system that are the root causes of why we are seeing a genocide in Palestine and in Sudan. But for people like, and for those of us who are protesting for Palestine, we actually have the moral and political authority to apply that analysis. And we have a political responsibility as well to make those connections and to mobilize for Sudan. But Yvette Cooper, as someone who is complicit and who has refused to stop the selling of British arms to genocidal regimes, whether it's the RSF in Sudan or whether it's Israel, as long as you are continuing to sell arms to a genocidal regime, you have no political and moral authority to say to protesters, well, you should be, because that's the implied audience of what she's saying, of the things that she is saying. You have no moral or political authority to call anti-colonial protesters, anti-imperial protesters out when you have not only the ability but the responsibility to actually do something to break the supply chain of the genocide. And it is a choice that you are on a daily basis refusing to make. You don't get to bring up the genocide. You don't get to instrumentalize the genocide of the Sudanese people as a gotcha against people who are expressing solidarity with Palestine. You've not shown me in that you genuinely care about the genocide taking place against the Sudanese people. In fact, what you've shown me is that you devalue their life so much that you are willing to reduce them and their suffering to a rhetorical device, which is cheap and tacky, to say the least.